Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Inash Raditsky. Ekrem İmamoğlu, the former mayor of Istanbul and arch-rival to President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, is standing trial on multiple charges, with prosecution seeking a mind-boggling prison term of over 2,000 years. İmamoğlu himself rejects the charges, which include espionage and corruption, calling them absurd and politically motivated, and asking the question, is it a crime to win elections in Turkey? Joining us here today to discuss this is Konrad Zasztowt, lecturer at the Faculty of Asian and African Cultures of the University of Warsaw. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
Right, so let's begin with that question posed by the very main protagonist of this story. Is it a crime to win elections in Turkey nowadays?
Well, that of course means that the whole case is political. It's not about some real crimes committed by İmamoğlu, but totally about politics in Turkey. And Turkish situation, political situation, is quite interesting since İmamoğlu, who is one of the leaders of the opposition Republican People's Party, won elections in local elections in Istanbul, so the biggest city of Turkey. By the time also the opposition won. And actually, it's not the first election. There were several elections when opposition won. Also, the election, the capital of Turkey, so Ankara, also other big cities like Izmir. So why the situation is interesting? Because we have the country where the Islamist party, President Erdogan's party, is controlling almost everything in this country, but is not controlling the biggest cities, which are ruled by the opposition politicians. So I think this is a huge problem for the ruling party, and this is probably the reason behind this. This case of İmamoğlu.
So a huge problem. Is it big enough to actually launch a trial with charges, that could lead up to thousands of years in prison? I mean, this is likely to attract attention of the international public opinion. Is Mr. Erdogan really not concerned about this, that this could be labeled a political trial?
Well, this is not the first time during the rule of the Islamist Party, Justice and Development Party, when such situations happen. So already, the party is ruling since 2002. So already in the first decade of the rule, there were some politically motivated trials by the time against mostly the secular elite. So some generals were arrested and also convicted, and also there were also very severe. Like they had to spend 100 or more years in prison, but finally this political situation after several years changed, and of course they didn't spend so long time in prison. But already for several years there are problems with the pro-Kurdish politicians who are in jail, and I should also add to this picture the situation with journalism in Turkey, which is very bad, and there's a huge number of journalists in prison at the moment.
So now, would you say that this is also partially because if this was a country that's part of the European Union, for example, there would be a mechanism to control questions of rule of law. Now, Turkey had a period during which they were hoping for accession, that later on that actually started to flounder. The whole process actually ground to a halt. So does it mean that without these mechanisms, the government essentially thinks, well, we can do pretty much whatever we want to, as long as it actually helps us secure electoral victory?
Well, yes, I fully agree that this the fact that Turkey is not a member of European Union doesn't help the democracy in this country, and I should remind that Turkey was in its closest moment to become a member of the European Union, actually under the rule of the same Islamist party which is ruling at the moment, the Islamist Justice and Development Party. But in this first decade of the rule, when already there were problems with human rights and democracy and citizens' rights. But yes, this party was that was one of the most important points of their political program to become a member of the European Union, and actually they are still talking about this goal. But since that time, many things happened in the political Turkish political system. So Turkey in 2019 became transformed from the parliamentary republic to the presidential system, and in this presidential system the power is in the hands of one man, so the president, so Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, and that was very much criticized by the European Union. So yes, so now Turkey is much further from this goal than it used to be, like 15 years ago. On the other hand, of course, I should say that many countries in Europe were categorically against this the accession of Turkey. So yes, we shouldn't blame only Turkey, because the European states were also not eager to see Turkey as a part of the European Union.
So how much do we know about these accusations, really? Because there are really multiple threads. There are accusations of fraud, there are accusations of corruption, but also espionage. Now, that seemed to raise a few eyebrows to outside observers. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, so as you said, there are so many accusations that it's difficult to follow all of them, and that looks very suspicious. I think even the fact that there are so many various different accusations related to so many different things, it looks strange. So in the past we saw many times people accused, for example, for cooperation with the Islamist Fethullah movement, and at the same time for the cooperation with the Marxist Kurdish party of the Kurdish workers, PKK. So totally ideologically, totally different organizations, which are of course both perceived as terrorist organizations in Turkey, but they are very much different. So it's difficult to believe that one person can cooperate in the same time with the Islamist radical organization and Marxist Kurdish nationalist political organizations. So in this case of this espionage, it's very, very strange accusation. It's about some link of some people with other people who have linked to some other people, and at the end of this chain you can find some criminals. So but it's not very logical and not very clear. And Imamoglu, he said, I will even not read all those 100 pages of accusation because it's a total bullshit.
Looking at this from the standpoint of the general public, would you say that there is a widespread conviction that the justice system functions as intended, or is it the other way around?
Well, I don't know what is what the average Turk thinks about the justice system, but the fact that there are huge problems with the justice system, it's repeated by many reports, by the European Union reports, and simply the justice system is controlled by the executive power, by the government. So it's of course a huge problem for the Turkish state.
Konrad Zasztowt was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight. And I'm Jan Szerewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.